Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel, or welcome if you're new. My name's Seti, I'm a PhD student studying the Milky Way, and I also really love to crochet and knit projects, and I especially love it when my interests in space and crafting come together. It's quite a busy season for me right now. I'm in the middle of writing up my probation report and preparing some slides for a presentation that I have to give as well, so it's been quite busy. So today I thought, rather than doing something really technical and sort of really mathematical or physicsy, we'd actually take a moment to sort of look at some more creative stuff and use this time to unwind a little bit. I don't have much of a rigid structure for this video, but what I wanted to talk about is my most recent finished object, which is a knitting project that I'll get into in just a second. I've also got a work in progress that I wanted to share with you as well, and two sort of concepty ideas for I think one of them is going to be knitting and then one of them is going to be crochet as well, so we've actually got quite an even balance when it comes to yarn crafts. So the first thing I wanted to share with you is a pattern that I've been designing, and now usually with pretty much all of my patterns on Ravelry so far, they're all crochet patterns and they're all amigurumis. But actually when it comes to my own personal craft, the majority of the stuff that I make are knitted garments, specifically sweaters and vests. And all of them, well, pretty much all of them will be to some degree or completely designed by myself. So I tend to make my own patterns because usually a lot of things don't really fit me quite perfectly. I'm quite a short person. So I decided this year that I would actually try and draft my own pattern completely from scratch, but also, of course, grade it up to larger sizes and smaller sizes, so it won't just be for my own body. So yeah, I'm really proud to present this, the final pattern that I've made, and I think I'm going to go with calling it the Barred Spiral Vest. And you can see it here in the dark green. And the reason it's called the Barred Spiral Vest is because the cable motifs that you can see displayed along the entirety of the vest are directly inspired by barred spirals. I don't know if I can show you a close-up over here. But yeah, they're quite simple looking cables, but they're not quite done in the way that you would traditionally expect. So when you actually create the cables and get rid of them up over here and down here, you don't actually just do knit two togethers or like purl two togethers to actually do that. You have to sort of loop the yarn round one of the purl stitches to basically do a 1 into 3 increase and a 3 into 1 decrease. It's quite unique, it's quite nice, and it sort of forces the knitting pattern to the knit cables to actually just sort of float on top of the purls. So yeah, it's quite interesting. The vest is made of Rowan Summerlight DK in the colour khaki. Now of course it isn't actually khaki, as you can probably see, and that's because I've actually dyed over it. I didn't quite like the khaki colour eventually. This was because it was a purchase that I made a couple years ago for another pattern that just I absolutely hated, and it just didn't look right on me. So when I finally found the inspiration for this, I decided that actually I wanted it to be a darker colour, so I just simply decided to dye it. Overall, I really like this yarn. It's really nice and soft, and despite it being dyed and, you know, boiled basically, it's actually like it hasn't shrunk at all. It's still really soft and smooth. It's quite nice. It's not your average dishcloth cotton, let's just say. It's much, much finer. It is a little bit pricier than those kinds of cottons, of course, but I really do think you get what you pay for. The only thing I'd say about this yarn is that I bought the DK version of it, but it knits up like a 4-ply for sure. Like I think I used 3.5mm needles for this, what I typically use for 4-ply to achieve gauge. And that's what I recommend you do with this. It's much thinner than your typical DK, but apart from that, I mean, I don't really see that as much of a problem. I mean, if it's going to be a summer garment in this case, I think you should have you should use thinner yarns like 4-ply or maybe a DK if it's a really breathable linen. But yeah, I'm really happy with the yarn. I should also show you the back, of course, as well. You can see I've still got the cables on the back as well. It repeats. It's front and back are symmetrical except for the neckline. So the overall motif, I wanted to go with something that's somewhat simplistic in terms of the aesthetic, not too cluttered, but I did want to add little details of, little complex details, which is the barred spiral pattern. But between the barred spiral and the stockinette panels, you've also got this these rib bits, so we've just got knit 2 purl 2 rib columns as well between them, and that sort of allows you to frame the cables as well. It makes it a little bit more sophisticated, and it does have a secret purpose as well, and that is that the vest is entirely knit straight, so there's no actual shaping going on. But when you add in the not the cables, what are they called? When you add in the rib, I found that you can get up to a 1.5 inch sort of decrease in the actual size of the garment. So when it comes to the waist and the bust difference, it can sort of hug you a little bit better in sort of shape to your body without it actually stretching out any of the stockinette. So it works pretty nicely. You don't actually see it stretching much. The only bit that really gets sort of opened up a bit is the purl bits over here, but they're really sort of sparse, so you don't really notice it at all. And then I've also got a really nice and thick rib over here, which is meant to hug your hips quite nicely. So overall you get quite a smooth sort of shape, which I think will complement quite a lot of people's bodies, hopefully. On top of that, I've also got the rib around the armholes, of course, and the neckline, which is just a simple, not quite a crew neck. It doesn't hug you very closely, but it's not quite a scoop neck as well. So it's sort of a mix between the two, and depending on how long you want to actually make the 2x2 rib around here, you can make it a little bit more conservative or a little bit more sort of open. It's really up to you. But yeah, I just figured it would be the best of both worlds, still get a bit of breathability while also getting a bit of coverage. Another thing about the vest, which was something I very conscientiously designed, is that usually I find with a lot of store-bought vests that the armholes are ridiculously huge. And while, it's a nice thing in terms of if you want to be able to let your skin breathe during the summer, I find it doesn't really make much of a difference, but also it can gape a lot, which kind of looks a little bit like I'm some sweaty gym bro, which I really don't like at all. So with these, I've made the armholes just a little bit more shorter than your typical sort of store-bought vest. And this sort of allows it to not really gape as much around the chest area, which I don't really like. And I think if you're somebody that wears a bra as well, it might come in handy, because I'm absolutely certain that it will cover up any sort of like bra situation going on. So it is quite nice for that, but also the armholes are of course quite nice and open as well. So if you're interested in a pattern that can sort of do that might want to give this one a go. Yeah, I don't know if there's anything else about the pattern that I want to talk about. Oh yes, sizing. Given that this is my first pattern that I have ever sort of made and drafted, I have only gone with 5 sizes, but the size range does go from 34-inch bust to a 50-inch bust. So it does cover a lot of ground, and of course because you've got the ribbing and sort of the stretchiness of the vest, it does actually accommodate a little, you have a little bit of leeway depending on how you want to actually wear it and how you want to style it and how you want it to fit you. But yeah, I think given that this is my first project, I would be very appreciative for a little bit of sort of patience while I learn how to do these sort of interesting aspects of pattern making that I've not really taken on before. But yeah, another thing as well is that I've got the small, medium and large, which have their own kind of design, which is this. Basically, you've got the cable right at the edge, and then you've got 2 cables in between, and then a cable right at the edge again. And then it's kind of the same on the back, so the cables are smushed right next to each other. But with the extra large and the extra large, I've actually graded the pattern very differently. Well, only slightly differently. So there's a little bit more spacing between there, and then of course the neckline and armhole do have different sort of decrease rates that sort of vary quite differently to the others, and this is mainly just to make sure that the fit sort of actually fits you really nicely and that it's proportional as well, especially with the plain stockinette panels, because if I just graded this one up, you'd just get much wider stockinette panels and you would sort of, I guess, diminish the cable pattern a little bit, which I don't think looks very nice. I feel like if you want to knit something, you should basically get pretty much the same product regardless of the size. It should look really nice and proportional on you, and you deserve to look lovely. So I've graded it completely separately. It's almost a very different, it's kind of like a different pattern in a way, so I think that was one of the big challenges as well that I didn't really anticipate, but I'm really glad I did it, because the final product for the extra large and extra large will also be really nice as well and look fantastic on you, which is, I mean, my priority, of course. I am just fiddling around with the vest now. I'm not actually doing anything. I don't really know when the pattern will be released. I'm still working on calculating the ribbing for the armhole and the neckline for the larger two sizes. And then, of course, I do want the pattern to actually look really nice and to have all of the important information such as the yardage and stuff. I would really like it to get tested, some of the larger sizes, but I really don't know how to actually go about asking for testers and what kind of requirements are needed. It's very new to me getting somebody to actually test out a garment pattern that I've made, so I will sort of have a think about those kinds of things and figure things out before I actually release the pattern. Yeah, so that is... Actually, I do have one more project that I can show you. I think you've seen me wear it in a couple videos now, but the first... Well, one of my favourite jumpers of all time, it is a bit crumpled, is the Spiral sweater, or Spirak sweater by Védis Jónsdóttir. She's an Icelandic designer who mostly designs very traditional sort of Icelandic lopapeysa, this being one of them, and I've actually had my eye on this pattern for, I think, since its creation or its publication, and it's been a few years now, so I'm really glad I was finally able to get a bunch of letlopi and actually knit it up. The actual pattern uses Alafos lopi, which is a chunky weight, but I decided to actually just size up a bit and then go with letlopi, which is a much thinner yarn, and that's mainly because Alafos lopi and many chunky yarns just look absolutely horrendous on me. I just look very sort of ballooned up and sort of a bit weird. So yeah, I avoid them like the plague, and I go with much thinner yarns. They sort of look a lot nicer on me. But yeah, I am absolutely in love with this sweater. It also has a half zip, which actually looks quite nice on me. I didn't think it would look nice at all, but it looks really nice. And of course it is in my favourite colours. We've got, I think this one was Pine Green Heather. This one was... I think it was like the colour Lime, like Lyme. I'm not sure what the actual name was. And then this was a pink or fuchsia heather, I can't remember. And then this one in the colour Ash. So all in all, it looks really nice. But it did inspire me to actually sort of tweak the pattern a little bit. Not for publication, of course. This hasn't changed enough for that. But just tweak the motif slightly, and of course... the neckline a little bit into a slightly different sweater that's a little bit more, let's say, scientifically accurate. So this is basically the exact same sweater, sized up to the same amount, with the zipper removed, but I have actually changed the motifs just very slightly. So whereas the other sweater had phase spirals, or one-armed spirals, this one actually features a Grand Design Galaxy that I designed myself. So you can see the bar here is in the ashy white, and then the actual spirals are in the light blue. And I absolutely love these colours so much. When I first ordered them, I think the colour on the website was just a little bit off. It looked more rainbowy on the website, but when it came along and I received the yarn, it looked a little bit sort of too bluey, and I didn't really like it at the time. I wanted to actually try and dye it green, which was terrible of me. But I'm glad instead I just put it away and sort of let it sort of leave my mind for a bit and let me come back to it with a fresher mind. And actually, now that it's knit up into a sweater, I am so in love with these colours, and I think you'll find that these colours are really fitting in terms of their name. So the black yarn with the rainbow speckles is called Galaxy, and then the blue yarn with the rainbow speckles is called Milky Way, which of course I think are the perfect combination, and I can sort of see that they were meant to be designed for each other because they both have the same sort of rainbow sort of heathered tonal look. But yeah, I'm absolutely in love with this yarn. I can't believe I hated it when I first bought it. I feel so silly, but these things happen. Yeah, this is probably one of my favourite sweaters of all time. It fits me so nicely. And I did, when the weather was really cold, I did wear it all the time during February, and I think I made it in February, so yeah, all of February and a little bit of March as well. But yeah, I'm really pleased with it, and I love this pattern so much. Okay, now I think we can safely conclude on the finished objects. I wanted to share with you a crochet project that I've actually been working on, and the main inspiration for this was actually in a couple papers that that I had read over the past few months during my PhD. So a lot of papers on the Milky Way tackle this really interesting concept that's relatively new. We've sort of recently discovered it, called the Gaia snail, which is just a phase spiral in the Milky Way. And this interesting spiral pattern comes about when you plot certain features of the stars in the Milky Way. So for example, their height above the galactic plane, across with its vertical velocity, and you get these really interesting one-armed spirals, which are very unique. But yeah, with some authors, they made some very interesting choices with their plots, let's say. And you can recreate these spirals looking at different sort of angles from the galactic center and different radii. So what a lot of authors, well, two authors that I've seen for now, but I'm sure that there are many more, have done is that they've sort of like put all of these plots together into these really big collages and sort of galleries. And so when you actually read the paper, it looks quite awful, and a little bit sort of overwhelming at times, especially when you've got really sort of sharp color gradients like the rainbow ones. But yeah, I did get roasted for presenting those kinds of plots at my journal club, those papers, which was quite funny. But one thing that I thought when I saw some of these, which I feel like is not a very normal response, is I thought that they would look really good as a patchwork blanket. So that is kind of what inspired me to make this. I'm really so embarrassed in saying this, but yeah, I saw them and I just thought I could crochet these one-arm spirals, couldn't I? Because I've seen patterns that do these spiral patterns and I love spirals. So I made a couple testers like this one over here. We've got basically a one-arm spiral with some black as the background, which then goes and gets squared off into not quite a granny square, but I guess like a square motif. And I did this with quite a few balls of yarn. I had a lot of yarn in my stash that I bought about half a decade ago from Hobie, which I never used, and I didn't really have any sort of idea as to what I would want to use it for, which was very silly. I shouldn't have actually bought yarn without knowing what I was going to make it with, but I have grown and learnt my lesson, mostly, for now. But I finally found some inspiration for what I want to use this yarn for, so I was really happy. And so I've got 9 colours in total, plus the black cone that I've been using to make the background colours. So I've got all of these different colours. We've got red, we've got orange, yellow. I showed you the hot pink, but I've also got some green turquoise, and then I've also got some dark blue, so like a teal. And then I've also got lilac and a darker purple, which I haven't actually started working on. So I'm going to sort of piece these all together and make a really big blanket using all of the little squares. And I'm really liking how it's like coming together already, like just seeing all of the colours just sort of in a pile. It looks really nice, and I can sort of see the vision now, which is pretty good and quite a good motivator, I find, when you sort of get to the middle of a project and you can sort of envision it all coming together. That can be quite a good boost of motivation, especially when it's a lot of repetition. Yeah, so I'm thinking for the blanket, I've got 9 colours, but a 9x9 square blanket isn't really going to be big enough, and I've got plenty of yarn. I can definitely make something much bigger. So I'm going to actually make it 16x16, and that means that every colour will get used up once per row, and then a couple of them will also get used a couple more times, sort of dotted here and there. And I was thinking for sort of where I want to sort of position the colours, I'm thinking of making it quite random. So it's just sort of evenly sort of random at every single point. I haven't really considered maybe any like colour scaling. I don't think I've really got the right kind of variation in the colours to be able to do that, especially with like the green as well. I've only got one green, which, given that it's my favourite colour, I know that's a terrible thing to say, but I couldn't find any other green that I liked. Yeah, I've got 144 that I need to make in total, which is quite a lot. But I am about halfway through it, so we're getting there, and I've been sort of doing it in between breaks with my coding and my report writing and stuff, so it's not been too painful to do, I'd say. In terms of ideas for future projects, the next one that I want to make is sort of more of a goofy project, but it ties directly into the Gaia snail or the phase spiral. And, well, I kind of quite literally want to crochet a little Gaia snail. The main reason I want to actually do this is I want to gift it to my supervisor as a belated birthday gift. But what I want to actually do with this specifically is he usually calls the phase spiral, or the Gaia snail in the Milky Way, he calls it the kanelbulla, which is the Swedish word for cinnamon roll. And he does sort of press on that everybody should be using that instead as its name. So I thought, as a funny little joke, I would actually crochet a little spacey themed snail for the body. So I've got some navy blue cotton yarn, and I'll just thread some lurex into it to make it sort of very shiny and sparkly. But for the actual spiral shell, for the actual shell, I want to actually crochet a little cinnamon roll and stitch it on top. So I feel like he would appreciate that. But yeah, it's a very goofy project, and very stupidly I decided to purchase the navy yarn for the snail, the light beige yarn for the dough, but I forgot to buy the yarn for the cinnamon filling, and it's just a plain brown yarn that I shouldn't have forgotten that, but I did, so I'll have to hold off on that for a little bit while I go and search for some brown yarn. It was very silly of me, but yeah, never mind. The second project that I've been interested in making is another vest. Whether I want to turn this into a full pattern, like publishable pattern or not, I'm really not sure. I think it will heavily depend on how the cable vest goes in terms of, publishing it. I'm a little bit scared as well about sort of getting very overly harsh criticism, but I think it won't be that big of an issue. I shouldn't really be worrying that much. But yeah, I do want to make a second vest. But whereas with this, with my other vest, I used, one colour yarn and working cables as sort of the main funky feature. With this, I really want to do some colour work, and I want to make it into, a vest that's got stranded colour work with the theme of not just galaxies, but sort of just have a more general sort of celestial feel to it. So I've already made a first draft of the colourwork pattern, and it does feature the barred spirals that I had knitted into this jumper. But I also want it to include just sort of stars, like a very basic starry background. So that's going to be very interesting. But yeah, I really do like the first draft. I hope I can sort of find a way to size it up and sort of grade it up, because it is quite difficult sometimes when you want a perfect, an integer number of repeats as well, but when you've got some sizes that don't quite fit that, I don't really know what to do in that case. So I will leave it for a second and sort of come back to that a little bit later. But I have got some yarn from my stash that I want to use up for this. And in one of my previous sweaters that I made, this was a couple years ago, I made the General Relativity vest, which was adapted from the Space-Time Hat by Ingeborg, which is themed based on general relativity. So many words. But yeah, I really liked using opal for that, and I found that the sweater's held up really nicely, and it's quite nice and warm too. So I've still got quite a lot of the anthracite grey that I used for the background of that. But I've also got these two yarns, which are opal cats and dogs. I'm not sure if they still make this one, but yeah, the reason I picked it is because I think with colour work, you don't want to go with a very crazily variegated yarn. You really want the actual design to really sort of shine. And so if you have, I guess, variegated yarn, you won't really be able to see it that well. So what I really liked about this specific version of Opal's yarns is that it doesn't actually have any sort of variegation. It's sort of just a very nice smooth ombre, which I feel like would work really nicely. But yeah, these are both also in my favourite colours. Well, my favourite colour combination. I love green, and I think pink and red work really nicely with green. So I'm going to be working it with these two. I might need to employ a third colour, but I'm not too sure just yet. So that's kind of all of my sort of creative endeavours this year with regards to, you know, space and spacey themed creative projects. The only other thing that's like not really spacey related, but is sort of just very, very loosely related to astronomy is I found this really nice fabric from fabworks.com, which is a UK shop that sells sort of dead stock or like really older fabrics that you don't really see that much in the UK anymore, but they're really good. They have really high quality fabrics, and they had this wool suiting which has these really interesting rainbow specks. I don't know if you can really see it on the camera that well. I'll try and I hope it doesn't blur. I can't tell because I'm not using the front camera, but you can see these sort of rainbow specks. And when the designers had actually made this, the main inspiration was actually comet tails, which I thought was so unique and so amazing. And I've never seen wool suiting like this before with like these little rainbow nips and stuff. And I just thought it was amazing. So of course I bought all of it. So maybe I'm thinking probably not in the summer because I will have no motivation to work with wool. But maybe in the autumn or winter time, I really want to make a suit with this fabric, and I'll need to pick out a design and stuff, but I don't have any of that. It's just an idea. It's just, I just wanted to show off the fabric to you. But yeah, I've got that as well, which I'm really interested in doing. I don't do that many sewing projects when it comes to spacey stuff. I don't have any sort of ideas for that kind of stuff. I really don't do much there. I think the last time I did something sewing related, it was the little JWST poof that I made a couple years ago now, so maybe I'll have to think of some sewing stuff to share with on the channel. But yeah, that's everything I have to yap about today. I want to thank you very much for your patience while I'm busy, you know, doing my probation review, because it is quite an important part of my year as a first year PhD student, and I do need to make sure I put in a lot of effort into this, and that does take up quite a lot of my time. I've also been dealing with some sickness as well, which has put a really big damper on my motivation and sort of getting things done, so I really need to work very hard on that, and I really do thank you while you wait for me to make videos. But yeah, what can I say apart from thank you? I'm really grateful. But yeah, I won't waste any more of your time. I'm talking too much. I'll see you in the next video. It will probably actually be a tutorial on how to make these spiral squares and how to make them into a blanket, where I'll go into more detail on how I'm actually making the blanket too. So it'll be another creative video, but then after that I'm really interested in actually sharing with you sort of all the research I've done this year and all the work that I've done. I'm interested in giving a little talk on that. So with that being said, I will see you in the next few weeks.